To do that. Our next individual here is Stephen Cook. He's pretty baller. I met him this morning. Stephen started his career over 10 years ago working as a retirement income planner. He is an accredited in this one. You're going to have to correct this word because I'm not very good with big words. He is an accredited investment fiduciary. Is that correct?
Got it.
All right. And investment advisor representative with the Principal Financial Group. He currently works with hospitals and companies across the state of Idaho to help educate employees on how to prepare for retirement. Outside of work, Stephen loves to play tennis and most all sports. He loves to spend time with his wife, Lindsay, Beckham Remington, his 2 boys, and Dar Louie. As a family, they love to spend time water skiing on the river, which you're going to have to tell me what kind of river is safe to water ski on, in the summer, and snow skiing in the mountain in the winter. Come on down, Steve Cook. Is this the clicker, Nate? All right.
Figure it out. All right, thank you for that. And the river is the Snake River, and yes, you can ski on it in Burley. So.
Okay, cool.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of get in front of you guys and talk a little bit about the retirement plan. And as Jeff said, you know, there's not a whole ton of time today. We'll try and get to any questions if we can at the end. If you have a really burning question that you can't wait, just raise your hand and get my attention. We'll address it. But starting off, what we'll do is we'll start out with going over our plan that we currently have, some of the provisions that are in it that you may or may not be aware of, and just kind of go down from there. And then later on, I'll get into some of the basics of investing, and I feel like now is a fantastic time to talk about some of those basics, especially with what we've been seeing with the markets recently. So just real quick, I would imagine most of you are enrolled in the plan. There's not super long waiting period to enroll in the plan. You have to be age 20 or older, service requirement is 4 months, and then you're automatically enrolled. And also monthly entry dates. The contributions that we have in the plan, the way that it works is your contributions are automatically vested. So any money that you put into the plan is vested at 100% right off the bat. Now, the hospital matches your contributions. And so those contributions have a vesting schedule. So when you look on your statement, whether it's you log in or looking at your statement, the employer match is vested at 20% a year. So it's a 5-year vesting schedule. So when you look on your statement and you see that you've got the account balance and then the vested account balance, this is what it's showing. It's showing that there might be a portion, if you haven't worked at the hospital for 5 years or haven't been in the plan for 5 years, you'll see a lesser amount that's vested. And then your well, that was weird. Going backwards. Okay. So your contributions are vested. And so the way that it's set up right now, your contributions are set at 7%. So you guys probably see that. Because this is a governmental plan, your contributions are set and everybody has the same percentage. Kind of like a pension plan that you would normally see. So the hospital then comes in and matches 6% of that pay. So automatically, you guys have 13% of your pay that's being saved for retirement. And I'll talk a little bit later about why that is awesome and why that's unique, in fact. Within the plan, you have the ability to withdraw your funds. The first is there's an in-service withdrawal provision, age 59 and a half. So for those of you who are a little bit closer to retirement, you have the ability at 59 and a half to access the money while you're working. So in-service means while you're working. You don't have to leave employment to get to that money. Now, the other ways are retirement, death, or termination. So those are the other 3 ways that you can get your money out of the retirement plan. One thing to note is these are pre-tax plans. So your money going in, there's no tax being taken out of it, and it's growing tax-free. When you pay tax on it is when you take the money out of the plan. So, for example, if you were to leave for another hospital, you'd then have access to the plan. If you're younger than 59 and a half, you're going to have a 10% federal tax penalty for taking that money out before 59 and a half. So those same rules will apply, and just something for you to be aware of.
Does the rule of 90 apply in your withdrawal?
It doesn't. That's per seat. So, but in a lot of ways it works very similar, but there isn't that rule with this retirement plan. Good question. The other way, and this is one of those things that whenever anyone comes to me and says, hey, I need to get money out of the retirement plan, we always talk about, why, first off. And there's a lot of times where life happens, you guys, and you have to get money, or you need it for a financial hardship. That is something that is available to you under this retirement plan. So financial hardships, you have to qualify for them, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I think I have it on the next slide here. No, I don't. Okay. So the way that a financial hardship works is that it has to be very specific circumstances. HR will have to sign off on it, first off. So you'll have to go and talk to Trish or HR, and you'll have to ask them whether you qualify. And then it'll go through principal, and principal will qualify it as well. And these are IRS rules. These aren't the hospital rules. These aren't anybody else's rules other than the IRS. And so you can do it for unreimbursable medical expenses. You can potentially get a hardship to pay off your principal residence or to repair said residence. Educational costs such as college tuition, room and board. Those are the kind of circumstances that you have to qualify in order to get a hardship. Now, the first thing that you do, however, is on the next slide. If you need money from the plan, there is a loan provision. And so for you guys to know, I'll kind of run through this really quick. There's a minimum amount of any loan of $1,000, okay? And the way that it works is your account balance, you have the ability to take a loan of the lesser of 50% of the vested account balance, okay, so that's less any loans, you can say I put that in parentheses, or $50,000, whichever is less. So $50,000, it literally is the maximum amount of loan that you could take, or 50%. Now the minimum, of course, is $1,000 for the loan, and you can only have 2 outstanding loans at a time. And as well, you can only have 2 loans approved in any 12-month period. And then usually the way that it works is that loan is slated over a 5-year period to be paid back. You're not paying interest to principal or a bank or anything like that. You're paying a set interest rate back to yourself. Now, a lot of people think, hey, that's a great way to get a loan, and if you have to get a loan, it actually is. But the downside that I want everybody to be aware of is there's a couple of them. The first is that when you take that money out in a loan, it is taken out of your account balance, meaning that that money is no longer invested and growing. So you lose your ability to earn interest, and that over time can amount to tens of thousands of dollars. The second downside is if you leave employment while that loan is still being paid back and you leave the plan, you have to either pay that back within 60 days or it becomes a taxable distribution. So in other words, it'll be like the IRS. Every time I walk over here I get blinded, so I know where I have to stand. The IRS basically looks at it and says, hey, this is a bonus that you got for the year, and they're gonna make you pay taxes on it. So those are a couple of the things that get in the way when it comes to that loan period. Any questions on any of the provisions before we get into a couple other points?
Isn't there a service fee as well that goes along with it per year?
There is. So, and it actually, the service fee is charged up front. So, and I think it's like 50 or 100 bucks. I'll have to find out exactly what it is. If any of you want to know specifically what it is, you can find it on the website. But there is that fee that they'll charge right up front. And then the interest, of course, is paid back to you. It's a good question. Any other questions? Okay. So now the basics are in place. Now, the one thing that I always try and get through to people, especially in a retirement plan, is know what your investments are doing. Have a plan. Know what you're invested in. And so today what I want to do is I just want to take a little bit of time and cover just 5 basic tips or principles that I have for investing. And this applies especially to you guys inside of an employer retirement plan, because what I find more than not is that it's very easy to lose track or not pay attention to your retirement plan when you're working. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind sort of a thing, because it's automatically taken from your checks. You're not really seeing it except for on your pay stubs. So you're not having to write a check every single month to put into an investment account. So what I want you guys to know is that you have us available as a resource for any of your financial planning, and it doesn't cost you anything. So reach out to me if you need help with any of this, but we'll kind of get into a couple of these things that I think will be beneficial to you. So the first point, investing early and aligning your goals, okay? And I'll kind of touch on each of these points after I review them here. Diversifying your investments, knowing your risk comfort level and your years until retirement, keeping your investment selection in line, and avoiding emotional decisions. And I'm going to make sure for sure I get to this last one, because it's very easy to do with investing to let your emotions take you a little bit. Investing early and aligning your goals. So really quick, investing early, for some of us it's not a possibility, or it's harder to do than others, and some of us don't get going until later in life. But it's proven that the earlier you start investing, the earlier you start saving, the better it is. Fair? So with that, if you are a little bit later in years, still, procrastination hurts you, even if you're not in your 20s and starting to save. So, and this is the example that I use, is this shows an example of Sam, right? And the difference, if he's earning, so let's see, it's not showing 40. Okay. If Sam started contributing to his retirement plan at 25, the difference those 15 years make from when he's 40. Now at the bottom is a little bit of showing what those numbers are, and this is basically saying that it's growing at 7% as well. So even if you use a lesser amount of growth, the difference is huge. And so this is a bi-weekly contribution of $50. So we're not talking a whole lot of money being invested, but just the amount of time that money is given to grow makes a huge difference in the balance that you have. And so that's another reason why usually it's discouraged to take loans unless you absolutely have to, because you want all that money working for you. This is another example, and what I wanted to show you with this is you guys don't have the ability to choose the amount that you're putting in. But here we go. But if you were to look at it, you're putting in 7% of your pay. Now this uses an example of if your annual pay is $40,000, and so 7% all the way to 10% a year contribution. Okay. Now if you look at the difference between that over time, so let's use a 7%, compare 30 years of savings, that same amount of growth at just 3% more savings a year is a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay. Let me, just for the sake of time here, we'll jump ahead a little bit. Diversifying your investments. Okay. Now you've probably heard this buzzword a lot, diversify, right? And the fact is, it's a very important concept or principle of investing. Now, when I say diversify, what I want you guys to think of is spread, to spread out. Okay, that's really what we're talking about with diversify. Because what you do when you diversify your investments is you're spreading out the risk or the type of investment that you have. And what you'll find in this retirement plan, especially if the hospital has set up for you, is the difference between having one investment or a bunch of different kinds. Now, investments are affected by geographical changes, political changes, as we've seen. I don't know if anybody here has been kind of following the markets at all, but the markets react. They knee-jerk react to everything that happens in the world. So the other day, when it came out that President Trump wasn't going to take certain actions in Syria, if you watch the markets, it automatically jumped up almost 2%. Okay, and this is very common, and you see that, and if you've been watching the markets at all lately, you've seen kind of it jumping up and down because of a lot of news. What's the Fed doing with interest rates? What is happening around the world? All of those things affect your investments. And so it's important to make sure that you don't have all of your investments in just one single area and that you're taking different levels of risk and different types of risk. Now, this graph right here is a lot simpler than it looks really, but all it's doing is it's taking 4 different kinds of investment classes. So when you look on your statements, you'll find a color-coded system. And you'll see it in different areas. And I think actually this is the exact colors that you'll find on your statements. So you've got large U.S. equity, mid-U.S. equity, international, and fixed income. And so you can see over a 5-year period of time, varying levels of up and down, okay? When you diversify and you have your money in each one of these categories, it can potentially help to kind of smooth those ups and downs out. And so if you actually look at a year-to-year performance, if you were to go back 20 years, you would find that almost every single year, one of these colors is on top. There's a different one. It switches every single year. So you can't just bet on any single one kind of investment, and that's the importance of diversifying. Now, this level, okay, this next topic anyway, knowing your risk comfort level and your years to retirement, I would say, I put it here at the 3rd point, but I would say this is probably the first question that you need to ask yourself when you're trying to prepare for retirement or make a plan, if you will, is how comfortable am I with risk and how long do I have until I retire? Now, let's see a show of hands, who is within, let's say, 5 years of retirement? Okay. And then everybody else I'm assuming is a lot longer, right? That's still a pretty good amount of people, though, that are within that 5-year range to retirement. Now, the question that I have for you is, how are those people going to invest different than, say, me, who still has 30 years to retirement?
If you had 5 years, you would put more in a guarantee. You'd be more conservative than you would if you have 30.
There you go. She said, for those of you who couldn't hear in the back, she said, if you only had 5 years, you would put it in a more conservative situation, which is the truth, right? The thing with markets is that it takes time to recover from the downs that the market goes negative. And so this is important, you guys, because what I find is I've had this so many times where people who are within 3 or 4 years of retirement, they'll come to me and they'll sit down and they're super aggressive with their investments when they shouldn't be. Now, this is pretty simple. And again, you guys, you have access to us for financial planning for free. What would usually cost you $1,000 to go and get a financial plan done, give us a call. We'll run you a financial plan for free. But to start out with, you can either give us a call or you can actually even go on Principal.com and there's an investor profile quiz. So if you're unsure what level of risk is appropriate for you or what you should be taking, you've got the resources in your login. If you haven't created a login to see your account, you just go to Principal.com, you can create that too. But this investor profile quiz will take you through a bunch of questions, and it'll ask you, how much experience do you have with investing? Where do you want to be invested? How comfortable are you with risk? It'll take you through those. If you call me up, I'll ask you the exact same questions. So the idea is really dialing down to what you're comfortable with. Now, this specifically you'll see on your statements, okay? So when we talk about the risk level, each one of these categories has a certain type of risk. And so your low risk, low return starts down here in short-term fixed income, and then you slowly jump up with the higher risk, higher return. Now, the inverse is true. I told you that I sit down with a lot of people who are close to retirement and are too aggressive. I also sit down with a lot of people who are far away from retirement that aren't aggressive enough many times. The point is that you want to identify what you're comfortable with and then make sure that you stay on track over the years. Okay? Now this is where we talk about staying on track, and this specifically is what I wanted to get to with the remaining time that we've got, is to talk about the markets a little bit. Now staying on track, we're talking about how you keep your investment strategy going over a longer period of time, right? A lot of us will be saving for 30 or 40 years until we hit retirement, right? Now, can anybody tell me, let's use the Dow Jones Industrial Average, for example. The Great Recession ended in 2009. Okay, so we're going on 10 years in the market since then. Can anybody tell me what the Dow Jones Industrial Average increase was from the bottom in 2009 through 2018? Does anybody know? 140% increase. Okay. Now we've had a couple downward jots over that time, but this is a fantastic time if you are too aggressive, if you're close to retirement and you need to dial back the risk a little bit. It's a great time to do that. So those of you who are close to retirement, take a quiz, call me up, let's figure out where you are. Those of you who are far from retirement, it brings up the conversation of rebalancing. Okay, can anybody explain what it means to rebalance your account? Anybody know? Okay, so I'm glad I'm bringing this up then. So rebalancing your account is when you start out, okay, when you start out with your investment mix, going back to here, right? You might end up, when you start out, you might have some in international, some in small mid, some in large, maybe some in fixed income. Okay. So let's just say you're a 60-40 split. Now bonds are typically your fixed income, your safer investments. So if you have questions on what the difference is between stocks and bonds, one's more aggressive than the other. And typically one grows faster than the other as well. So if you start out a 60-40 split, market activity impacts 140% from your investments over 10 years. All of a sudden now, that percentage is skewed. You now have 75% in your stocks, 25% in your bonds. Rebalancing is getting that back to where you need to be. Now, that doesn't always mean you have to rebalance, because some people are completely comfortable having this amount and their strategy might shift. But for most of us, you're gonna want to rebalance to make sure that you're moving down some of the money that you've earned here into the safer areas. And typically the advice is, you guys, anytime there's a 15 to 30% shift in the market is a great time to rebalance. So when we're going on 140% growth, something to think about. Call me, I can help you do that. You can do it by yourself through your login. It'll automatically rebalance if you want it to. You actually can go into your employer site or employee site and you can select for them to rebalance it automatically for you if you'd like. So the options are there, but of course first you have to figure out what your strategy is to begin with. Now, this is also the same thing when we talk about avoiding emotional mistakes. This is part of that, sticking with your strategy to the end. And we'll end on this. But what I wanted to show you was the difference of emotional knee-jerk reactions. The market's going to go up, the market's going to go down if you're in equity investments, if you're in stocks, okay? That's just a part of investing. The question is always the amount of time that you have in not making emotional decisions. So if you were to look at this, this is basically taking an example of back in 2009 or 2008. If you had $94,000 in your account, this is what it would have dropped to by the end of that run. Okay, so you're down to 64,000. Now let's just use Sam from earlier as our example. Sam opens up his statement. He's freaking out. He sells all 64,388. And he puts it in a CD. Okay, and we'll say a CD at 2%, I think is what they're using right there. So 2% interest. Now, if Sam makes that knee-jerk reaction, that 65,000 then 5 years later has grown to 71,000. So he hasn't broken even again. Right? Now, this is true with every time the markets have declined. Is that usually within the next year, the markets have recouped the percentage that they lost or close to it. And over time, the markets come back even stronger. So if you look at someone who would have stayed in the markets or not sold and gone into a CD, after 5 years, rather than 71,000, they're back up above where they were before, 123,862. Okay. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's very easy to get concerned and try and time the markets and say, hey, they're going to go to war in Syria, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that, and it's going to make the markets drop. Well, I can tell you, I don't have a crystal ball, and most of the time, people who try and time the markets get burned. So the strategy that I would recommend to everybody is figure out your timeline. How much time do you have to retirement, and invest according to that. If you're 3 years from retirement, more than likely you shouldn't be in super aggressive investments if you're going to need that money when you retire in 3 years. And again, inverse is true as well. So that's kind of all I have for you guys today. Any questions? Only a couple people sitting up there. That's good, I guess. I'll put my cards out on the table, you guys. Feel free to give me a call. We'd be happy to help you with any other questions that you might have. I appreciate your time. Thank you.